Hi, I'm Keaton Evans. I'm Chief Lighting Technician, Gaffer, insert your preferred job title here in Toronto. I work mainly in commercials. So as you look around our set today, you might notice that some things look a little different, especially if you're watching from the US and definitely in the EU. Some of our distribution boxes are going to look different, some of our connectors are going to look different. Now, one thing that you might know about Canada, whether it's a stereotype or not is not for me to say, is that we have some inclement weather in comparison to other places. So one thing that we can start with are these lines here. We call these joy. Now, this is pretty similar to what you might see in the US as baits. Now, whereas the US will have something like a 60 amp baits or 100 amp baits, our joy tops out at 60 amps. Beyond this, we need to move to number 2 Seaway. So this is effectively a baits paddle that has been heavy duty weather protected. You can see it's got more insulation around here than a standard baits cable. You can see that it's got this extra tough, rigid, well, soft, rubbery texture here that when it connects into a 4A, when it connects into some sort of distribution box, it forms a weather-tight seal. Now, let's be sure to say that it's not waterproof, it's weatherproof, right? These are sort of our bread and butter for everything up to M40s. We run them frequently off of our distribution boxes into what are called DEEF boxes. DEEF boxes, I'm not sure what the US name would be, but they're just Edison. This gives us 320 amp circuits. Now, we call them DEEFs, funny enough. They're named after one of our ex-prime ministers, Diefenbaker. And the reason that we call them DEEFs, and if this person's still around, I'm sorry that this is now becoming international information, but it should be well known that when these were being used, actually, John Diefenbaker tripped over one of these on stage while doing a presentation for the CBC, and they were immediately named DEEF boxes. So these would be like our main sort of bread and butter distribution that gets out to our M18s, that gets us out to Video Village, anything that has an Edison plug, and up to 2K, obviously. One of the other things I can show you here that you wouldn't see anywhere else. So this is what we would call a 4AW. This gets us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 outlets that get us up to 60 amps on our joy lines. So we can run joy right to an M40, for example. And then we have cam lock going in, which is pretty standard just about everywhere. We have our breakers in here that allow us to turn it on and off. 4AWs are also something that you see all over set. We now actually have, thanks to some local innovation here, something called the B-Box that I can show you in just a minute that allows us to have the choice now between having a 4A next to a tower of power, which I will also show you in a minute. We can now just have a singular box that allows us to have our Edison, we can have our cam lock through or our Seaway through, and then we can also have our joy lines. So I can show you that in a minute as well. But this is a box that, again, unless you're in Toronto or Canada, you're probably not seeing everywhere. This is effectively what some people would call a 3-fer. So 1 in, 3 out for cam lock, or Seaway number 2. This would allow us to break out our lines, right? So this, instead of having to have your 3-fers or your crow's foot stacked on top of one another loose or just sort of laying off to the side, this is essentially just a nice little metal case that keeps everything a little cleaner. You see variations of this all over the city. This is what AE affiliated equipment uses. So we're next to our truck. This is AE3. Affiliated equipment is a rental company in Toronto. They have camera, they have grip, they have light. Recently, in the past like 8-9 years, they've got some location stuff. But AE's bread and butter in Toronto is commercials. That's really what their main focus is. This is AE3. This is the Ecolite truck. Now, in other places, you might see a gaffer who shows up maybe with a truck like this. In Toronto, that's a little different, certainly in the commercial game. We bring out these trucks per job. They come out with grip equipment, with lighting equipment, which I understand would be called a combo truck in other places. Now, this truck comes equipped with a 500 amp genny. It's got what is effectively, as I said earlier, a bong in it. The thing that makes it eco-friendly is that it's got some filtration that, if I understand correctly, uses some sort of liquid to get the fumes a little cleaner before they leave the truck. Now, we as Gaffers and, Best Electrics don't have much to do with the generator. That's really up to our genny ops who come with the trucks. Off of our generators, we have to run within a certain distance, I believe it's about 2 meters, a disconnect. That disconnect down here is rated for 175 amps. So we start, if this was a bigger generator, we'd start with 4-aught out, and then we can skip down to number 2. But this is a 175 amp disconnect. I can show you the inside of it. It is a single switch. It's hilarious. You open it up thinking it's going to be some sort of big mystery inside. It's a single switch. It's quite excellent. We got our pads down here, raising our connections. We aren't expecting any really inclement weather. Otherwise, we would raise those up the amount that the ESA says we have to make sure that they're out of puddles and stuff. We don't tend to wrap things in plastic, but we will E-tape them. Now, there are some ESA-specific guidelines wherein if you wrap it in a certain way, it might then be considered insulation, and you can't use E-tape as insulation. So we will, in very inclement weather, definitely take some E-tape to our connectors and wrap up the connections. But Seaway itself is pretty good at keeping out water. Anything else that we do beyond the connection itself is definitely just to make absolutely sure everybody's going to be safe. Yeah, sorry, number 2, cam lock. Seaway is, I guess that's a term for us here. I'm just figuring out a lot of this stuff as Luke kind of prompts me and says, like, and you mean this? And I'm like, yeah, right, that's a term that we only have here, I guess. Yeah, so we come out of our generator to our disconnect, which needs to be a certain distance away. I believe that's about 2 meters. We're going to run down here. We've got, our belly bins and stuff with some extra cable mats and a fire extinguisher. We're going to follow our line to what is one of my absolute favorite things that has appeared in Toronto in the past few years. This is called a B-box. Now, this is a Toronto invention. Pass-through power is something that for some of the US-based people watching this will see and be like, oh my God, yeah, we've had pass-through power forever. We have had variations of pass-through power. You guys saw the crow's foot tower earlier. This allows us to take our cam lock in, spit it out the other end, and wind up with a bunch of Edison connections as well as some Joy connections here. So the other version of this, if we weren't using a B-box, would be a crow's foot tower that we would then have, what I showed you earlier, a 4A connected to. And then that 4A would spit out our Joy, and then we could connect a DEEF box to it, and that would then spit out our Edison outlets. This takes away basically 2 or 3 components. And these are just our breakers underneath. So we've obviously cable matted all our driveways here. We had to very quickly skip these cables here, so they're sticking out a little bit, but we had to skip them out. We come up here, we've got one of my favorite things in the world. If everything could be accessible cable mats, that would be great. They do cost a little bit more, and they're a little thinner, so they're a little harder to run. But on sidewalks, we make sure that we're using accessible cable mats. Now, these are great in studio too, and let me tell you why. When the grips need you to lift up your cam lock to get their dolly under it or whatever it might be, no longer. They don't have to deal with the big, heavy cable mats and skipping over that. They can just roll the dolly right over these. So I'll walk you over to our first lamp here. This is, just an M18. Personally, although I own some LEDs and we make use of LEDs in varying wattages across different jobs, one of my favorite things to do is sync back into a known language, HMI, tungsten, less so fluorescents because they're kind of ugly these days. I have used them in the past few years though, they're still fun. So we on an M18, everybody, it's lunch. There you go, that's lunch. Yeah, thank you. So, we're just making safe for lunch here. You'll see some of my guys running around, Nick and Chris on my team today. It's a 3 and 3. Another thing that I guess doesn't translate everywhere, but that would be 3 grips, 3 electrics, and then we have a swing today. So, this is a Roadrunner stand. You guys, I'm sure in California, see them everywhere. They're not as common. We have the big boy Matthew Vaders usually, although Affiliated Equipment owns a lot of the Roadrunners. I really like them. They prefer them a lot. We've got our M90 there. We've got our M40s here. Now, for your M40s, I believe, those are on baits for you guys. They gotta be, right? 60 amp baits?
Yeah. On a 4K.
So for us, we have these connected to Joy. You can see with that nice little sort of lip that we have here on this connector, and then the opposite on this one here, it creates a really nice weather-tight seal. Have sort of some back and forths all the time. Like you can, no matter where you are, you could run a M40 off of a 7K genny. The thing is, we a lot of the time will forego twist to Joy directly out. Twist being, your standard twist lock that you're used to. But instead of skipping right out to Joy, because we've all heard stories here of somebody plugging a DEF into 220 and then somebody goes to plug their phone in and it blows up the phone, we tend to stray away from twist to Joy. So if we were to be running this off a 7K genny today, we'd find another way to do it. Or at the very least, if we had to have a DEF on 220 for whatever reason, we would make sure that it's labeled with big stickers so nobody blows up their phone. You've kind of already seen like DEF boxes, but I mean, there's one in action. They all look a little different, right? Like, depending on the age of the DEF boxes, you might get one like this that has all three 20 amp outlets on the front instead of two on 3 of the 4 sides. This is sort of more standard, is 20, 20, 20. And then, if you open that up, you've got, breakers in there. Oh, we've got a tower in play over here that I can show you. So earlier, we were looking at a B-box. Now, what the B-box does in a sort of singular housing, this does more splayed out. And there'd be reasons you might want this over a B-box. Maybe it's that this is easier to rig. Maybe you have a team that hasn't used a B-box before, so they're more used to on set or in stage for a longer show rigging up something like this. So this is that crow's foot tower that we were talking about, or tower of power as we might call it. So you can see we've got our cam lock coming in and we spit out to a 4A. Again, that gives us 6 60 amp Joy connections, and that allows us to go out to our DEF here. And this DEF is powering up, it looks like it's charging a phone. It is it is charging a phone. 500 amp genny, you might as well charge a phone on it, right? Then we've got this spinning out to our M18 over there. This is, what's this running to? What is this running to? Oh, this is our, this is our M90. And we've just run our head cable back over there. Yeah.
It's going into...
Yeah, so this is going right direct into our tower of power, or crow's foot tower. I've spoken to a lot of people from many different parts of the world who do our sort of work. Distribution is this and cabling is this big finicky thing. You see a photo, you see a video, and somebody's like, well, we wouldn't do it this way here. And kind of the answer is is it safe? Does it work? Does it get your light up? Is anybody going to get hurt? If the answer to those is nobody's going to get hurt, it's safe, it gets our light up. If it's yes, it's fine, it's great. One thing I've learned though, is in some places you might not actually ground a generator, which is crazy to me. You might not bond to the house that is on a totally different phase than your generator, which is also crazy to me. Again, is it safe? Is it what you do in your area? Is it the kind of thing where nobody's going to get hurt and your lights get up? Great. I don't care. For us, we ground our generator. So today, on most jobs, I end up ordering an absolute crap load of extra grounding cable. Now, over, I believe, 185 feet here, our ground cable needs to hop up to 4/0. We're doing a pretty short run here. So what we ended up doing was taking our number 2 Seaway, our number 2 cam lock, tagging it into our line and rephasing it with E-tape so that it is green. It represents our ground line. We have run it up here through some cable mats, and this main line that you're seeing here runs over behind. Art department should not have put their stuff here, but that's okay. We will forgive them. Just our grounding clamp right here. So this will connect to a hose bib. The hose bib inside, we will have confirmed, is connected to copper piping. And that copper piping will be bonded to the ground in the house. So we effectively have a giant ground. We are also now bonded to the house, so if we wanted to, we could run our cables inside. If there was a major difference in amperage between a light that we have inside and, let's say, an open cable or something that's inside the house, and the two were to be touched, now because they're grounded, we would have a safe path for that extra flow of energy to go back to ground. Nobody would get hurt.
Hey guys, I'm Robert Wharry. I am the key grip for this commercial here, and I'm just going to run you through some equipment that Luke pointed out that was a point of interest. So this here is a butterfly frame. These are really great for outdoor usages, and they come in as small as 8 foot, and they come in 12-foot varieties, 12-20 varieties, and also 20 by 20 varieties. And what makes them so fantastic is that they're very strong, very robust, as well as you can see in this configuration here, you can have quite a large frame collapsed and stashed to the side. And then when you need it to fly in or be built, it can just be uncollapsed or snapped together. And then you can have a very large frame that takes up quite a small footprint. So this is a little bit unconventional for today, but what we're doing is just trying to block out some of the sunlight from set. We're just sending it through a half soft frost, which is a really nice sort of fabric. It's akin to maybe an opal or something slightly thicker than that. Right now what we've done is we got to send it full stick on a mambo, which in this case is about 20 feet or around 20 to 25 feet. And a 12 by full stick, that's a lot of force, especially when you get a bit of wind. We have quite a bit of wind today. So what we opted for here is just to actually use the tree as an assist. And so we got it up as fast as we could. We actually leaned it onto the tree so that we're using the tree to support us, as well as use additional ropes just to make sure it doesn't want to peel off the tree.
Cool. And then tell me about the corners.
The corners?
Yeah, because we don't usually use corners like that.
Yeah, so these are the standard corners that you'll see for butterfly frames. This is also one of the great things that makes them modular. If any one side of the frame breaks or needs to be QC'd, you can just replace it with another one. There's just these locking pins on each side. The corners are also great because they have holes in them, so they're great for tying down. And they're also rather inexpensive because they're just made out of aluminum. Yeah, it does have roughly the diameter of speed rail. A hard 90 clamp, any sort of clamp will grab onto the frame. But yeah, the actual material is much thinner than speed rail. So I wouldn't really rely on it for anything structural. And one more good thing about this frame system is it's completely modular, as I said. So if you have a 20 by 20 frame and you have an 8 by 20 frame, you can Frankenstein them together to have a 20 foot by 8 foot frame. You don't see that every day, but it's totally in the realm of possibility, and having flexibility with your tools is kind of everything on a film set sometimes.
And then how are you locking it down?
Well, right now, like I said, we are rocking the mambos into the tree, using the tree as support, as well as having tie-offs in 4 different directions from the top of the frame. We're going into dog screws, which are things that you just typically use in your yard to keep your dog from running away, and you just screw them right into the land. We got some 10 millimeter static black rope here that we use with a trucker's hitch to keep tension on the frame so it doesn't want to flap around. And as well, I know a lot of people, and I'm interested what people in other regions do, use bowlines on the frame. At least that's what a lot of people here do. But me and my team, we actually opt for clove hitches on the top because we find there's less play, and the more force that is applied to the line, the tighter the hitch gets. So we really like that knot for this application.
I would go hitch too.
Yeah. This is a really common piece of equipment where we work in Toronto. It's a 1-inch aluminum 4x4 frame. We can put gels on here. We can put diffusion, like in this case you see. These are the workhorse of most grip crews up here. They are super durable. They are really versatile, and they're also very plentiful. You'll have a lot of them on set. You can combine them to make like a quick 4x8 diffusion. You can turn them into a bounce. Obviously we have floppies, which are the negative version of these. We really like the 1-inch variety because it really stands up to winds. So you can have some pretty severe winds, and as long as this whole system is locked in and not moving, these frames will withstand a lot. Now, that being said, the weakest point that I've seen these things is just these welds here. So if you ever do get some real force and everything else is locked in, they can bend, but also that's the good thing about aluminum is that it will bend before it snaps. So you can always replace something if it got damaged by some wind. But they're great frames, and we use them all the time, and they're super robust. So if you do have this 1-inch, what we do pretty often is if you want some color on your lamp and you need to protect the color from bleaching, let's say you're putting an 18K through it or even a 9K when you're getting to some thicker gels, we'll put heat shield on one side and then you'll put the gel on the other side, and the air gap plus the heat shield will actually protect the gels from bleaching or melting or depending on how heavy of a gel and how bright of a lamp you got going. Let's talk about apple boxes for a second. So here in Toronto, we might see some different apple boxes than you'll see in different parts of the world or different parts of the US. In speaking with Luke, we noticed that there might be a little bit of a discrepancy here between stuff you see other places. Now, we'll ignore the fact that these apple boxes are a little short. If you're clocking that on your end of things, that's because this particular rental house makes their own and they're off size from everyone else in the city. But that's not what we're really talking about, so we'll ignore that for now. What we're talking about is this might be more of a typical example of maybe something that you see in your city where both sides of the flat side of the apple box has no handle. But what's way more common here is to have all of our apple boxes have holes on both sides, both of the flat sides of the apple box. And that, we find it really helpful for passing things off. So if you're the person who's I'm handing this to, there you go. The handle's right in front of you. You don't got to grab the top or the bottom or the side or anything like that. You can just grab it and go. As well, a really, really great way to carry multiple apple boxes is you stack them like this. And then if you're really enterprising and not holding a microphone, you can actually hold 4 apple boxes with just 2 hands, which is a really great way to transport a bunch of apple boxes into a building or all sorts of different locations if you need a lot of them all at once. Of course, there's the obvious issue that if you're using any of the families of apple boxes to like level a stand or anything, you want to keep it away from the center. So that's the one downfall about this. You can add a pad, or what a lot of us do is just kind of avoid it. Keep it on the corners. If you're really in a pinch and if you have the time, put the pad on top. But typically, I don't find anybody complaining about these. We really like this feature of most of our apple boxes. And
your quarters usually just have one hole?
oh yeah, so again, this rental house is a little different from others and they make their own, but I would say most of the apple boxes that we see, they have a feature where one of the side of the apple box is flat and then the other side will have the handle, which is kind of best of both worlds because you still, when you're handing it to someone and sometimes there's a hole on top, they can still grab it. It's easy to pick up off the ground right away. You don't got to get your fingers under thing or anything like that. But if you're leveling a stick or you're leveling track and you don't want this hole in the middle, you will have a flat side. Like I said, this vendor doesn't sell those, but that's typically what you'll see is on quarter apples, flat on one side and handle on the other.
Thank you so much for coming out and visiting our set. If you want to have more discussions, learn a bit more about what it is we do from various places all around the world, I'd suggest joining the Gaffers Salon Facebook page. If you can't find it, message myself, John Roche, Maya Feeney. We'll get you hooked up. We'll get you in the group. It's a really wonderful resource. There's people from all different backgrounds, all walks of life, doing our line of work all across the world. A great place to learn. Thank you for watching. Stay safe. Be awesome.
It was a hoot hanging out with these guys during their lunch break. Keaton was kind enough to work it out with the producer and DP ahead of time, and everyone was so sweet to provide a window into how things are done on a commercial set in Toronto. When you can work with good craftspeople who are also your friends, hey, life is pretty good.